What if I told you that exercising after 50 requires a bit more caution than you might think? If you're over 50 and love to stay active, there are 5 exercises you should approach with extreme care. In this video, I reveal what they are, why you might want to avoid them altogether, and what you can do instead. Now, let's clear something up. No exercise is inherently bad. It's often poor technique that leads to injuries. However, I've identified 5 exercises that tend to be particularly risky for those over 50. These exercises come with a high risk of injury and offer minimal benefits, making them less than ideal for your workout routine. So let's dive into what they are, why you should stay clear of them, and what safer alternatives I would recommend. So the first exercise I would recommend that you either avoid or adjust is an abdominal crunch. And when you're doing an abdominal crunch, it does work your abdominals. So the 6-pack that you see, it's really good for strengthening those muscles. However, what tends to happen is when we're doing our abdominal crunch, we do loads of them, and they're also used with momentum. And so for the over 50s plus, yes, we do need strong abdominals, but the abdominals don't actually stabilize your back as well as other muscles do. So they're the muscles that I believe we should focus more on rather than your abdominals. So if we just do an abdominal crunch first and back down. So do it now with your knees bent. Here, you do, okay, and back down. And what you'll find is that we get a lot of neck tightness from this as well. We're throwing ourselves up, which can put a lot of pressure through your back and even your discs. And repeatedly doing this can actually cause more trouble. So an alternative and safer way to activate your abdominals and stabilize your trunk is to do some heel touches. So what I want you to do is just to tuck your pelvis under and just flatten your back. So tilt your pelvis back, flatten your back against the floor. And I want you to keep that position throughout all this next movement. I then want you to do one leg at a time. Just lift your legs up to 90 degrees and the other one as well. Okay, and you might find that this is hard enough. And if that is, perfect. Just stay in this position and you'll feel that your abdominals and your lower abs are really firing, which will really help stabilize your lower back. If this is quite easy, the next step is to then just lower one leg down and touch your heel to the floor and back up, making sure that you keep your knees at 90 degrees. So then repeat on the left and back up and go again. And if you're finding this quite easy, the next progression is to then straighten and lower your leg. And you'll really find that your back is fighting to keep flat on that bed. And it might even shake, and that's perfect. That really means that muscles are working and they're working safely for your lower back. The next exercise I would advise you to avoid is an upright row. So when we're performing an upright row, if you go ahead, we are taking ourselves really high up through here and back down. And it's a really good way to strengthen up your shoulders. However, there's a lot of risk associated with this movement as we age. And the main thing is, as we are lifting, that internally rotates our shoulder, which narrows that gap within our shoulder joint, which can then cause a shoulder impingement. And if we repeatedly do this, all that's going to happen is that keep impinging that rotator cuff, and that will eventually cause swelling and possibly even a tear. And that's the last thing we want from when we're trying to strengthen our shoulders. The alternatives to an upright row, I'm going to give you 2 options, or you can do both exercises. The first one we're going to do is just to try and strengthen your rotator cuff. And then the second one, we're going to make it a little bit more functional and strengthen the whole of the deltoid as well. So before we start any of these movements, I want to make sure that you bring your shoulders back and down and just bring your shoulder blades together ever so slightly. I want you to keep your elbows nice and tucked in. And all we're going to do now is just externally rotate your arms, hold it for a couple of seconds and back in, okay? And you'll really feel some tightness and some fatigue around the back of the shoulders. Okay, so a couple more of those. Good. Okay, and relax. And then the next one we're going to do is a lateral raise. So again, shoulders back and down. Nice and tall, keep your arms straight and just take your arms out to your side. And it's a fantastic way, and back down, fantastic way to really strengthen up your deltoids and your rotator cuff, bringing everything together in a much safer way than the upright row. The next exercise is a tricep dip. The tricep dip is fantastic for activating your triceps and your upper body in general. However, there are some safety issues that I'd like to address. So if you perform a tricep dip for me, what that happens as we go all the way down, we're bringing our shoulder into that real end range extension and back up. And that's putting a huge amount of pressure through the front of your shoulder, i.e. your bicep tendon. Go again. And for me, back up, it's just not worth it. So that we need to change how we do this movement. The movement itself, the idea of it is fantastic, but how we perform it needs to change. The alternative to a tricep dip is to, in fact, just change the technique and the positioning. So rather than having one bench or one box where your hips are really far forwards, which puts all the stress through the shoulder, what I would advise is to get you 2 benches or 2 boxes and sit in the middle and bring your hips much further back. And so now if you do your dip, your shoulder does not go into nearly as much extension because your hips are so much further back. This still does the same job as a tricep dip, i.e. it works your triceps and the front of your shoulders really well, but it's so much safer. So the next exercise is the behind the neck press. So if we just go through that. So the main aim for this exercise is to strengthen your shoulders and above head mobility. My biggest issue with this is, firstly, as we age, our shoulders naturally just become a little bit stiffer. So to come into that external rotation is harder in itself. And so what we do to compensate that is we then have to arch through our lower back as well. And so then that'll put a huge amount of risk in our lumbar spine, as well as our shoulder, as well as our upper back. And if we look at from a side view, what you'll also find, if you go again, you'll find that you just then push your head forwards, either to avoid the bar or just to get your momentum. And then that's going to put a huge amount of pressure through our neck as well. So the alternative to a behind the neck press is to do in front of the head press, like a military press. Okay, so if we do this whilst in standing, so we just turn, that's it there, so keep it, start it in front of your head and now press up. Straight away, that'll take the pressure off your shoulder mobility, your lower back arching, and just make the whole movement a lot safer for you. I much prefer dumbbells than a barbell as well, because it will really highlight any sort of unilateral weakness that we most likely will have because we're so much dominant on the one hand. The final exercise is a barbell bench press. So a barbell bench press is aimed at strengthening your pecs and your triceps. So basically any sort of pushing movement, which is a fantastic movement to do. However, what it can do at the bottom of the range, when the bar touches your chest, is that it puts a lot of stress through the front of your shoulder. And we see a lot of people who are trying to get back in the gym and they go straight for the bench press and do rep after rep after rep. And the shoulder just cannot cope with the volume, but also the mobility. So if we have a look now, this is what happens. So we come down to the bottom and we really find that if you're doing full depth, it puts a huge amount of pressure through the shoulder and back up. And this is where we develop a lot of rotator cuff issues, or the start of. And I believe there's a safer version of this. So the alternative to doing a barbell bench press on the bench is to do a dumbbell bench press on the floor. So if you start performing those, the beauty of this is that you don't have to take yourself as low. And then that'll take a huge amount of pressure off your shoulders while still getting that pec activation and that tricep activation. And it's a hell of a lot safer for the over 50s plus to really protect your shoulders. Not only that, dumbbells, again, like I've already mentioned, is really good to isolate that unilateral weakness. You see, a common complaint I see in the clinic with the over 50s is shoulder impingement, especially after performing the upright rows. So if you are struggling with shoulder impingement pain and want to reduce this instantly, make sure you click on the video and check it out.